So CA just announced the entire Khorne roster with all the units his army will be able to field. So let's take a look at them all and see what kind of army Khorne will be giving us, although we have seen a lot of it already. Kicking it off with the Lords, Skarbrand is the only legendary Lord as expected. He's going to be an absolute melee powerhouse with a ton of killing power, and really that is all he's geared towards, just murdering everything. And then in a similar vein we have the Exalted Bloodthirster, who seems like he's just going to be the budget version of Skarbrand. Still going to be a big damage dealer, not going to be greatly different I imagine, although the Exalted Bloodthirster in the demo could fly, and apparently Skarbrand can't fly, so that could be a big difference between them. So we're going to have two large lords to choose from, but there's also a smaller lord in the Herald of Khorne, who will no doubt be dealing out the damage as well, maybe a better crowd fighter. He can have a Juggernaut or Bloodthrone mount, so he's got some options to get around, doesn't have to just be on foot. So that is all of the lord options, just the three. Solid damage dealers most likely, but not a lot else. I believe this is the Herald of Khorne we can see here actually, so a fairly spooky chap. Now let's move on to the heroes, with the first one being the Cultist of Khorne. Now from the description of this hero, you can't really make out much about what he's going to be like in battle. He likes spreading corruption, he likes getting stuck into a fight. Sounds like he's either going to be some kind of duelist, perhaps good at taking out other characters. Will be kind of humanoid as well, not looking like a demon or anything, I think. Oh, and he rides a horse. Horsey mount. But otherwise, not a lot to go on. And then we have the Blood Reaper, which we saw in the demo. These are basically bloodletters that have made it. They're special. They've proved themselves to the big man Khorne. Again, they're going to be melee smashy boys. They'll be able to buff up friendly troops a little bit. And they come with a Juggernaut or Bloodthrone mount. And that is your two hero options. So only a few single entity characters. Not a great deal in the Lord and Heroes department, but should be enough. They're all kind of similar, just smashing the crap out of everything in sight. Seems to be Khorne's game, right? But let's move on now to the Infantry, where we have three types of Chaos Warriors of Khorne. The Axe and Shield version, who are a little bit tougher, a bit more tanky, but still great at putting out damage. And then you've got the Dual Axes version, who are naturally going to be great at damage dealing even further, and they'll be anti-infantry. And then you have the Halberd version, who are your anti-large choice. So kind of similar to the Chaos Warriors that we have already in the Warriors of Chaos. So big heavy infantry, all with their own role. And then we've got the Bloodletters that we saw in the demo. They are demons, so they're going to be a bit harder to get rid of. They're not going to be routable. Likely going to be the closest thing you have to a cheap infantry, but I don't think they'll be that cheap really. They are armor piercing and anti-infantry, so they've got a fair few things going for them, which means they won't be probably less than 500, maybe 600 to 700 would be a guess. And then we also have the Exalted Bloodletters, who we've also seen before. They're basically exactly the same as the normal Bloodletters, they just have better stats. They've got more melee attack, more weapon strength, more melee defense, all the important stuff. They're just a better version of the Bloodletters, so still just great anti-infantry. And that is all of the infantry for Khorne. So some very expensive, I imagine, Chaos Warriors with some also pretty expensive Bloodletters. So nothing cheap in the Khorne army, in the infantry department anyway. Let us move then into the world of Cavalry, beginning with the Blood Crushers, who we've seen in the demos. These are basically Bloodletters riding Juggernauts. Big, heavy cavalry that hits hard, is good in melee, has armor piercing and a bonus versus infantry, so going to be one for smashing the infantry to pieces, looking for that hammer and anvil. And then there's also the Skull Crushers, who are very much the same deal, just a bigger, better, stronger bastard version. Although they don't have a bonus versus infantry, but they do have a much bigger charge bonus, so they'll be a little bit more versatile to take on other targets, other cavalry, maybe monsters. Even though they're not anti-large, they still hit so damn hard, they can put big damage on pretty much anything. Looking at their stats from the demo, it feels like they could be the new top dog cavalry. We shall see. Although one big difference between Blood Crushers and Skull Crushers is that Blood Crushers, the weaker one, are ridden by demons, so they're not routable, whereas the Skull Crushers are ridden by Chaos Warriors, who are routable. So there is that fairly significant difference between them as well. And lastly in this area, although not technically a cavalry, the Gore Beast Chariots. Much like we have for the Warriors of Chaos at the moment, I imagine, there'll be a big hard-hitting, hard-to-stop chariot. Although in this artwork we can see that this chariot's actually being pulled by a Juggernaut. Although there are no Juggernaut chariots in the game apparently. You'd expect it to maybe be a Lord or Hero mount, but apparently not. So that's all the cavalry for Khorne. Not a lot, but some strong stuff in there. On to the last part of Khorne's army, where he's got a lot of stuff, the monsters. Beginning with the cheapy old Chaos Warhounds that we've known for many, many years, with a few minor differences, but they're going to be one of the cheapest units in the Khorne army, so may well end up being the new frontline unit for the Khorne army, because they're the only cheap thing you've really got. But they'll otherwise likely be doing the usual Warhound jobs of chasing down missiles and artillery, or chasing off routing units. And then we have the Chaos Furies, who basically seem to be like harpies. We saw these in the demo as well. Don't think there's too much to report there. They're going to be like the usual harpies that we already know. Good flyers, nice and fast, good for chasing stuff off, good for chasing after missiles and artillery. Just flying warhounds, essentially. For something fresh, though, we have the Flesh Hounds of Khorne. These are a little bit different. They're like big warhounds. So I imagine they're going to be pretty hard hitting, probably armor piercing with those big old teeth and claws. Kind of similar to the War Lions for the High Elves perhaps, or the Razorgore Herd for the Beastmen. One of your faster cavalry type units anyway. And then we have the Spawn of Khorne. These are going to be Chaos Spawn basically, but I believe they're armor piercing. I think they were in the demo, and I think they have Rampage as well. So once you charge them in, they take a bit of damage, they just lose their shit and start killing everything, and you can't do anything about trying to control them. So likely an unbreakable, unroutable, uncontrollable infantry killing nightmare. And there's still plenty more monsters to go with the Minotaurs. Two versions, the Dual Axe version and the Great Weapon version. Dual Axes likely going to be very good anti-infantry and armor piercing, while the Great Weapon version will probably be anti-large, much like the Beastmen Minotaurs. So going to have some big, heavy, monstery anti-large options at their disposal. Now for a unit that I'm super excited about, because in my little prediction video, I said I'm really excited about this unit, I hope they put it in, but I was kind of doubtful that they would. But he's made it. It's the Soul Grinder of Khorne. This beautiful monstrosity is going to be in the game. It's glorious. Half machine, half demon. He sounds like he's going to be absolutely disgusting. Going to be hard to kill, apparently. Going to be a bit of a tank, but also, I mean, look at it. Big damage dealer as well. Going to be just murdering everything and everybody. Likely, though, very expensive. Looking forward to trying out some triple Soul Grinder builds, though. That will no doubt be absolutely disgusting. And lastly, in the monsters department, yep, there's one more. The good old Bloodthirster, of course, that we've seen in the demo and that we already know a fair bunch about. We've seen that since day one. But a nice flying monster that you'll have there. Again, guess what? It's a damage dealer. So that's all the monsters for Khorne. He's got a whole lot of them. Looking nice on the monster front, as you would expect. Which brings us to the last section of Khorne's army, the artillery, which is the skull cannon, of course, which is kind of a cannon, got the long range, which you can use, but you can also use it as a chariot. Good for charging into melee, is going to be quite quick as well, which is obviously quite rare for an artillery, but it's going to be pretty valuable to Khorne overall, I think, as it is his only ranged option. He has no missile units, no handguns, no bows. This is his only ranged option, so it's going to be pretty important for his army if you want to potentially use a little bit of range or play a little bit defensively at any point. But obviously, this army isn't really going to know the meaning of the word defensive. It's going to be all offense. And lastly, although not technically an artillery, it's actually really a war machine, the Blood Shrine of Khorne. This thing is going to be pretty important as well, because when it gets stuck into melee and it's fighting in melee, it will heal nearby troops, which sounds absolutely terrifying for the powerful troops that Khorne has. Not to mention it's just kind of a chariot, so it can charge around and do its damage that way. So that's it for the artillery and war machine section, and that is it for Khorne's entire roster. There it is, the whole thing, all of the units that it'll have available, at least at launch. Of course, there's going to be room for DLCs and things, but it's quite a small roster. The Kislev roster was about 25 units. This one a little bit smaller at around 23, I think, including Lords and Heroes. And with Khorne's army, it seems like it's going to be a small and powerful army. Much like the High Elves, everything is super expensive, which means you won't be able to field huge armies, at least in multiplayer. And of course, there's no magic for his army either, so it's going to be quite a different playstyle for this army than I think any of the other factions in the new Warhammer 3. But it's going to be super aggressive. He's got a lot of armor piercing to make up for that lack of missiles and for not having tons of units, I imagine. Which definitely sounds like my cup of tea, to be honest. But what do you think? How are you feeling about the Khorne roster? Any more excited for it than you were before? Or just not fussed, not a chaos guy? Or are you just waiting for Nurgle? Or Slanesh? Or Zinchi Boy? In fact, one of the most exciting things about this Khorne roster reveal is that now we know about everything they've already talked about. The Kislev roster is out, the Khorne roster is out, so now they have to shut up about those two factions and not show us any more of that, and show us something new, right? It's got to be Nurgle, Slanesh, Tzeentch, Cathay. I think people are going to start losing their shit if they throw out another Kislev trailer or another Khorne trailer. So it's time for us to see something new that we haven't seen before, because a lot of the stuff in this Khorne roster and in the Kislev roster, we already saw from the gameplay reveal that myself and all the other YouTubers did a month or so ago. So it's time for us to get something new. Give it to us. Give it to us, CA. Hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. See you in the future.